Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's edition of the Terry Lakin Action Fund radio show. Today we have Catherine Vandemoer, or better known as Dr. Kate, to those of you that follow the eligibility issue, and she has a lot of great things to say, and what is certainly a very interesting week in the news. For those of you that may be tuning in for the first time, LtC Lieutenant Colonel Terry Lakin is a dedicated soldier who felt strongly that his officer's oath demanded that he force a way to get confirmation of Barack Obama's constitutional eligibility to be president. And in doing so, invited his own court-martial and is now finishing the end of 6 months of imprisonment at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. There's a lot of information about this on his site at terrylakin.com. So we're going to proceed as we do. We're going to do an introduction with Dr. Kate, and we're going to talk about her experiences, a little bit about what she's done, what she's planning to do. In the last segment, we'll talk a little bit about Terry, and we'll address some of the events of this week regarding Barack Obama's announcement. So Catherine Vandemoer was started as a scientist, geology, hydrology, watershed management, and so forth, and somehow got from there to the last 2 years to be a strong constitutional writer. And so welcome to the show, Dr. Kate.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, we're very pleased, and I know we expected a couple weeks ago, and you had a personal issue that kept you away, but here you are. So we're going to ask you, how did you get from a Ph.D. in all kinds of things having to do with water to being a constitutional lay scholar? Give us a little background on that. What an interesting journey.
Yes, it really is. And just as a background, a lot of my work for the last 25 years has been involved in Indian water and water rights. And from that standpoint, I've had to know a lot about the law, the interaction of federal law, environmental law, state law with regard to the tribes. And, you know, you refer to the Constitution referring to the tribes, but they're only mentioned once in the Constitution, and it's in the Commerce Clause. So I've had sort of a background in that area for a long time, and along came 2008, and I was doing my typical research on the candidates, which I do, and I could not believe that that Barack Obama was even running, because being born in Mexico as from an American mother and a foreign father, I knew early on at age 8 that I could not run for president for the two factors of birth in Mexico and my father's citizenship. So, you know, in addition to the work that I have been very involved in for all these years, that work kept going, but I kept writing about Obama's eligibility. And my first major blog article was called The Trojan Candidate. And that sort of set off what has then been a 2-year issue focusing on the Constitution. I started my blog to learn how to, basically to educate myself on the Constitution and the history of how we got to where we are right now. And in doing so, the biggest constitutional violation that I can see right now is Barack Obama's ineligibility for the office. So I did a whole lot of research. I've done some of that, and in the process, actually relating it back to my work, in the process of this, I also realized that there are no constitutional legs underneath much of the environmental work or environmental laws that we have. So this now is turning into a long-term change, if you will, trying to abide by the Constitution of the United States in not only everything I do, but the focus on this particular issue, I think, is the largest, the greatest crisis we have faced since our founding. There are a lot of other things we can talk about, but the final thing that got me into this was getting one more petition to sign away Obamacare or to oppose this justice or that justice. And I just realized, this guy is not even eligible. So then from there, like I say, I'm still doing my work, but I sponsored a usurpathon, or went with a couple of other friends to D.C. to call attention to that. That's where I met Terry Lakin, and I had been writing about him prior to that, but it was nothing like meeting him. So in a nutshell, I'm still doing natural resource management. That is my field, but I am absolutely focused on this constitutional crisis right now.
Now, it's interesting, you said you research as you always do. So I would gather over the years as you've participated in the political process, you have engaged and researched candidates carefully. You've not been a, like, who should I vote for, Harry, kind of voter, right?
Exactly. I've, as a naturalized citizen, I came to the United States at age 3. When you take your oath, you have a responsibility. And from that standpoint, I look at everybody. I was a long-term registered Democrat. I am not affiliated with anybody right now. And I dropped that affiliation the minute I saw the incredible effort to get this person in. So I do all my research, like I'm sure many Americans do before they vote too.
Now, the reason I was asking is, of course, it's so fascinating. We had Brent Morehouse on a couple of weeks ago, and he was just so focused on this. It's interesting to hear you say, as a naturalized citizen, you take this seriously. Those people who are born into citizenship in the United States, I don't really seem to understand the great gift they've been given in the elegance and the beauty and the really astounding brilliance of our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence. And that's what I guess we'd really like to call people back to, right?
Exactly. And, if you look at my blog, I have looked at every article of the Constitution and the history, and I am absolutely fascinated. And I believe I'm one of the lucky ones who grew up still with American values, morals, and principles, and didn't get brainwashed, if you will. I went to some very good schools, but I did not get brainwashed with the hatred for America. Although I'll have to admit, when I was 18, 19, 20, the pressure to hate America was pretty big. So, yes, I do take it very seriously, and this is I think one of the biggest things for me. I knew when I was a little kid that it was not possible for me to be president. You know how kids say, "Oh, what are you going to be?" And I said president, and of course, well, you can't be. And it was not just one factor, birth in another country, but it was my father's citizenship. I never gave it another thought. And so I understand why the founders put that in there, because being born in Mexico, I would have a natural sympathy for Mexico, if you will. And could I be counted on to, go to war against Mexico if that was necessary? I would like to say yes, but I don't think I could. I think it's a real issue. So I have a personal interest in this and knowledge, and I am astounded. The Constitution is 4,400 words. It's a piece of brilliance that's lasted for a long, long time.
It is really astounding, as we have said in a couple of articles on the Terry Lakin site, that, and the ad we wrote for the Washington Times that said, the Constitution came, actually, to be a precursor to this, a couple weeks ago I was in Washington with my son and went to the Newseum, which is an amazing museum, the history of news. They have a whole display called the Documents of Freedom or something like that, and they have the actual books of all the books and writings that led up to our Constitution. It goes back hundreds of years. Wow. I think it's easy when you watch the movies that a bunch of guys got together and said, hey, let's get rid of this king. We'll just write some stuff up. But they didn't. This came out of hundreds or thousands of years of dialogue, and our Constitution and Declaration of Independence are such an astute, precise description of really the best way anyone's come up with for flawed humans to rule themselves. And it is remiss for us to mess with it, which I think is what really frustrates people like you, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't believe it, because when you look at all that history, and you read it, and you understand where they were, and you understand how educated these people were, and the thousands of books, like you said, that they used to draw this. If they had meant that the president could be just simply an American citizen, they would have said that. Instead, they used specific words with intent: natural-born citizen, or citizen at the time of the founding of this Constitution in Article 2. So 4,400 words, every single word was wrangled over. Every single word. And so that has to last now. One of the things that's so amazing to me right now is that we all of a sudden have to seek permission from courts to exercise a definition that's been in existence for 235 years. And that we feel right now in 2011 that we can say, oh, those guys really didn't know anything. They, natural-born citizen, what does it mean today? That's not the point. These were things that lasted, and from that extent, I don't know if you've read the book, 5,000-Year Leap. That was. America's system is the best right now for the entire world. It is not perfect, but it's the best hope for mankind. And to see such a violation, at the same time to observe such courage on the part of Terry Lakin, how can you not ache for our country, and how can you not do everything you possibly can to educate as many people as you can, as well as yourself, to step up to the plate of citizenship?
Yes, absolutely. It is quite remarkable. I've often imagined, I've been to lots of trade shows, as I'm sure you have, right? So I thought, okay, if I was starting a country, like if Microsoft bought Haiti or something, right? And they said, we need to get a new government here. They went to a trade show of all the forms of government in history, and they all had their booths and their big shows and magicians and dancing girls and whatever, and we had to go look for a form of government to franchise, per se, right? Well, what would we choose? Why would we choose anything but a form of representative government, whether it be parliamentary or federally focused like ours? I mean, it's the only form of government that has consistently produced stability in the world. It's very interesting. So let's leave it there. We're going to go to our break right now. When we come back, let's continue on with this, Dr. Kate. We were talking about the just astounding brilliance of the Constitution, and there are the Declaration of Independence-related documents that came not out of just somebody sitting around talking, but out of hundreds of years of research, hundreds of years of development, of cultural change to get to a form of government that restricted monarchy, avoided despotism, and yet allowed for a huge amount of security within society. And that's, of course, what we've seen, as we said, from representative forms of government, both parliamentary and federal, and why people would want to destroy it unknown to us. So let's go on from here, because you've now been writing about this for the last 2.5, 3 years. So tell us what you've done during that time. You say you've written over 400 articles. Let's go through them one by one. I'm just kidding. Give us the highlights.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, just generally the brilliance of the Constitution has been a big subject, and so I've focused on different ones of the founders and their statements, in particular George Washington, excuse me again, and other of the particular articles of the Constitution. So I went through each article of the Constitution and its history and so forth, and of course, in particular, Article 2, and found that the natural-born citizen clause is really about national security for our nation. It has nothing to do with anything else but that. Article 3, Article 1 on the powers of Congress, when I would do an article on understanding an article, for example, the powers of Congress as enumerated in Article 1, I would then do a series of articles on how this current Congress and all Congresses have been steadily eroding and violating the 18 enumerated powers that they had, and then extending all these powers. The things that in particular have bothered me have been Congress's abrogation of their duty to declare or not declare war, the encroachment of the executive branch, and so forth. So I went through every article, every amendment, in looking at the amendments in particular, those that were fraudulently ratified, the 16th Amendment, of course, on taxes, the 17th Amendment on the senators' representation. So what I discovered through all this research and what I ended up then writing about was how did it come to be that we have so much violation of the Constitution right now? How did that happen? And so starting from, and this is where I had to do some really hard thinking myself as a scientist, because as a scientist, you know, who needs spirit? Who needs anything else? If you can describe everything according to an equation, what do you need anything else for? And I found out that science has been a big part of the progressive movement, and the quote-unquote progressive movement is really about Marxism and eugenics and or euthanasia, excuse me, pardon me. And it's really about societal control and the use of science, efficient science, to model government after was one of the first breaches of our Constitution, the whole theory and philosophy behind a constitutional republic, that it could be replaced by the efficiency of government and the use of the scientific way. This is where, quote, political science came from, was the application of the principles of science to the management, essentially, of human beings, even though it was created under these lofty ideas. Now, for example, a lofty idea that was never used in our Constitution is the word democracy. I found out that democracy is actually mob rule, and every democracy has failed. But you can see every public official from the 1950s on making room for democracy across the world. Well, thank you very much, but I don't think our founders wanted democracy, because as you noted and as I have noted, the thousands of books that they have read would show to them that none of these experiments in government have worked. Democracy does not work. So it has been I would say, a removal of a kicking under of the legs of the balance of power. For example, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 really took Americans' power completely away from them, devalued the dollar by... Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead. Keep going.
Much? Oh.
No, you're doing great.
Anyway, completely devalued the dollar. The 16th Amendment taxed incomes, so the government became much more financially powerful than the states. The 17th Amendment took away the power of the state legislatures to select the senators, so that the disruption has been the balance of power. The kinds of wars that have happened since 1913 have all been, part of the central banking idea. In many ways, the 20th century was a tragedy and a waste of life because billions were spent on wars, and in the process, we've all been then enslaved to this now trillion dollar debt, so forth and so on. So I did a series on the tyranny in America. I have done a lot of series, of course, on Obama's ineligibility. What I will call it, when it all boils down to this, it's about allegiance. And Obama is not does not have singular allegiance to the United States. That's why I knew when I was a kid that my allegiance was dual. It was divided at birth. So that's, so I've looked at all of that. Run across a number of terrific writers on this subject, and Mario Apuzzo, Commander Kirchner, looked at all the cases that have been going on. So it's been a very, very challenging, interesting journey, and the part that is most frightening to me, I'll tell you, is that every single institution of our government has been compromised. Every single institution. And Congress has locked down whatever power there. I have written a number of articles in which I believe that the true people that are rebelling are not us Americans. It's really the government that is rebelling against us, the Constitution. So in part, it's been a fascinating journey of enlightenment and understanding how great this country is and how marvelous. But it has also been extremely frightening to see how deep the corruption is. And so now the focus naturally shifts towards, okay, what are our options? What are our constitutional means of moving forward? Because in my view, socialism is not an option, communism is not an option, and neither is democracy.
Now, let me make one comment there so people understand.
Yeah.
What Dr. Kate is saying is dead on. We're not implying there's some huge, gigantic conspiracy here. What we indicated in the first segment, a lot of what she's observed, very accurately so, has come from a long-term dissolution of people's knowledge of what is in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence-related documents. People simply are letting very important rights slip by them with no protest whatsoever. And that is causing this continual degradation that you're describing, correct?
Yes, and it's, as Ben Franklin said, those who trade their liberty for security deserve neither. And, you ask people when they walk down the street, hey, are you free? And they say, yeah. And if you are alert to this, you see the noose slowly dropping around the neck of Americans. And it is at a crisis point right now where a wholesale change must be made, and I believe we can do this in our country peacefully. And the extent of the corruption of the Constitution is measured by this man called Barack Obama, who is completely, in my view, in my history, in my research, and on my blog, is not eligible for the office. So, like I said, in a lot of ways, I'll tell you, it feels like yet another career for me. I love water and natural resources, but, and I had a lot of dreams in that field. But right now, it's going to be focused on this constitutional crisis we're in. I can see this consuming the rest of our lives because I think to get us back to where we need to be constitutionally is probably going to take us a good 15, 20 years just to eliminate the problems that we have.
Very interesting. Yes, I mean, this is something, again, a couple of weeks ago we spoke to Brent Morehouse, and he was talking about this from the focus of the sovereignty of the states and how all the mechanisms are in place for the populace to take action to help bring correction to it. And people keep asking us, what do we do now? What do we do now? And the answer is extremely simple. Number one, go out and read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and some related documents. Two, find a political party you're comfortable with in your area and get to work and get candidates elected who are going to be sensible, constitutionally focused, and bring this nation back to a representative republic and not a democracy. It is not a democracy. And this is what Dr. Kate and so many others are pushing to. And unfortunately, the whole birth certificate issue obfuscates the core issue, which is constitutional integrity, right?
Correct. And, I would have to say as well as not only getting involved in the political parties, but understanding that we actually have two more votes in addition to our electoral and to our vote in an election. One is your regular petit jury vote, and the second is your grand jury vote. And we need to revive those institutions as well. If you look at the Seventh Amendment of the Constitution, which is basically your quote-unquote right to trial by jury, take a look at that, because if we revive those institutions, no federal court can actually review any decision made by a jury. Take a look at the Seventh Amendment. And so renewing those kinds of things. Now, the birth certificate and Obama's obfuscation, if you get to the point where the highest office in the land has been usurped, then it's very serious. It couldn't have happened unless those other legs underneath this. Going forward, my mission is still the same on my blog, is to continue to expose now all the deceit surrounding essentially Obama's ineligibility. And I just have to say that, it's a result of Terry Lakin's sacrifice. We are much closer today to beginning to unravel this than we were before he took his action. So I wanted to just put a huge thank you out there right now, because, Obama released this ridiculous next document, and in my view, it is, number one, obfuscating and irresponsibly and not properly taking the definition in Article 2 and twisting it. It's a straw man, the birth certificate argument of Obama, and putting out these insulting documents. I think what he pulled out recently was just an incredible insult to all Americans, and certainly an insult to Lieutenant Colonel Terry Lakin. So going forward, my mission is really continue to support Lakin, for example, by not stopping writing about this, and to always insist on this. In fact, this afternoon I'll be writing a letter to Michelle Obama and Joe Biden, who are supposedly working with military families, and I'm going to try to get a list of who those people are, but to lay this out as far as the unacceptable behavior of Obama and the betrayal of the military. So that is a big issue for me right now, because I can't believe that if there are military families out there, that they would find this acceptable at all, that Obama, because he felt like being amused, was going to deny Terry Lakin a trial. Again, I have to say that the corruption that I see was only reinforced by having been at that court-martial and having seen everything denied to Terry Lakin and what they did. So I will still be focusing on this. You know from my blog that I've already asked the question, where's the Indonesian adoption? I think there are significant questions that have been raised about the veracity of this, another electronic image. I doubt that Terry Lakin, by the way, would have been able to go to the Pentagon with a laptop computer, open it up, and show his birth certificate to show up to serve in a war. I doubt that he would have been able to do that. So everyone needs to understand that there's nothing that we have out there right now if we don't have a document. Period.
Yes, two points on that. One is kind of funny. Yes, absolutely. He had to bring a physical birth certificate.
That's right.
As I did when my son went to play 11, 13 football, as my daughter did when she went to get her driver's license. Maryland, it was nothing recent. For years it says on the Maryland MVA site, bring a long form sealed birth certificate, not your certificate of live birth, not your birth ID card. In Maryland you get this little ID card. It was very, very clear. So absolutely, and Terry has already said that. He was requested to bring his actual birth certificate. And there's one other interesting thing that's happened. You brought this up. I was going to mention in the fourth segment. Let's talk about it now. So since Wednesday, we have gotten pummeled with a lot of negative email, and it runs in basically three basic paths, I guess. One is really pretty rude emails claiming that Terry is a racist or a bigot or something like that. That is so far from the truth, it's just hard to imagine. Anyone who read his CV, who looked at the website, watched his videos, and had nothing to do with it whatsoever. The second is a small group email that says he's a traitor, a deserter. Well, he's not. I mean, go look at what he did. Yes, absolutely, he did not obey an order to deploy, but he was never given the opportunity to defend his reasons to do that. And many of us, as you do, felt he had perfectly acceptable grounds to bring that to a challenge. So the third one, which is to me, he said, did the whole world of its brain, the whole News Corps of its brain removed. I mean, people are time shifting, which means I'm getting emails saying, now, didn't he realize what a jerk he was, blah, blah, blah. As you pointed out, the point was we didn't know when he did this. In fact, no one knew. So they're saying, oh, well, now it's out, so don't you feel silly? Well, no. The point was you didn't have anything, and you might not have had anything, and you still don't have much. we wrote a response to the Democratic National Governor's fundraising letter that some of you may have read, and they specifically have a phrase in there. Let me just look it up real quick here on the site. They said, let's see, they said specifically, this is not true, so forth. It basically said, people continue to do this in spite of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, continue to force this issue. And our response was, you can say it as much as you want, but there simply is no evidence. Show us some, right?
Exactly.
So go ahead. This is what you were getting to. Show us something, right?
Yeah. Well, there is also, ridiculous stuff that's missing on this electronic image. Like, where's the father's signature? There are clues in there that Obama was never an American citizen. And where's the Indonesian adoption? That's a vital record. Anyone who is adopted has the original document destroyed, and or sealed, or forever put under seal. No one can see it. Also, I think again, I don't want to belabor this ridiculous electronic image again, but whatever he got in the envelopes from Hawaii may not have been what the White House put up on its website. If so, we've got a forgery shop operating in the District of Columbia, and I would suggest, why don't we have the district cops go in there and arrest this guy?
I would say
sorry,
that,
but
I would say that. Right, it's just the whole thing is absurd, because why not just release, bring the original document out and allow the press corps and some others to come to the White House and actually inspect it?
Yes.
I mean, why this facade? It is a little bit silly, is it not?
It is. Well, one of the things I want to do in whatever way I can through my radio show or whatever is to reach out to military families and to reach out to soldiers who may be listening to this, because it is absolutely outrageous that this could happen, and that Obama could say he's amused, and then further joke around at the press, the press dinner on this issue, and then just thumb his nose at the American people like we've got more serious things to do, and then run off to sit on the Oprah show. This is just unacceptable behavior. And Lieutenant Colonel Lakin was right. He is right, and we are right to keep pursuing this issue.
Yep. I mean, I agree. It's very, very interesting. Of course, that now he's getting hammered, and we wrote a response. Of course, it's on the website because so many people called that day, and we just wanted to make it very clear. So
yeah, let me say a couple of things. The race card is certainly going to get focused on, because now when we all want to say, okay, so your father was Barack Obama Sr., what about his citizenship and so forth? They're going to try to use that as a race card, but I think it's dead. And I think that basically, they've so overused the race card, this cannot work. The traitor and deserter time is going to understand that he is not a traitor or deserter, and none of us ever were. And I'm telling you why I stood when Terry Lakin was found guilty, had to stand to get that hearing. I stood with him because I wanted everyone in that courtroom to know that they're condemning every American when they say that. And fine, if he's going to be guilty for asking a question, then I'm going up there. I'm going up there too. And this is again their failure to get what's going on here. I would throw back John Kerry or Jane Fonda or any of these other people who actually were traitors to our country. And again, this was in my view, the courts reducing him to the status of an ordinary soldier, rather than acknowledging his oath as an officer, required him to do what he did. And our country and all of us, and for all time, will always know that Terry Lakin did the right thing. And I'm glad you wrote to the National Governor's piece, to them, but it also, to me, from the standpoint of everything that I've written, the more they do this, the more, lie to the American people, the more we understand who are the people who have taken over our country and how deep that is. The National Governors Association, that's ridiculous. So when we ask for Obama's resignation, we can ask for theirs too. So anyway, this is, I'm sorry you're getting that, but also what I can see is the race card is dead. But anything I can do to help on that would be great in my writing and so forth. And as you know, another thing that we can put back in these people's faces is you know, why are the terrorists getting more rights than Lieutenant Colonel Terry Lakin? Why does talk about racism? Why does, you know, the black Muslim, you know, get let off and the white guy gets thrown in jail? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, it is fascinating. It really is.
Put it right back on them, in my view, because this is just their last-ditch desperation.
Well, we responded, of course, on Wednesday, and we concluded our press release by saying the Terry Lakin Action Fund is calling for a full and complete presidential pardon for LtC Terry Lakin, including restoration of pay, benefits, and service. Terry holds no malice towards Barack Obama, nor did he, when he chose to bring the issue to a court-martial terror, simply wanted confirmation of Obama's eligibility, a process that has finally begun in earnest. Now, I know this is going to really shock you, Kate. I didn't hear from the White House.
And why would he pardon that? I mean, you know what I'm saying? But well, very good. Very good.
We immediately got blasted on cap log. Someone said, you know, oh, so he's acknowledging that he's the president? Well, whatever. You know, the fact is, right, why couldn't he have just, well, you know, two and a half years ago when this first came up, 2 years ago when Terry started filing standard requests through military channels, a year ago when he continued it, when he and Greg wrote numerous letters to the White House, why couldn't these documents have been revealed then, or just anything? And then it was so kind of casually thrown out to the press corps like, oh, my dog found it. You know, it was a little inappropriate, and I think some restitution needs to be made here, particularly for Terry, who's kind of given everything up for this. So we want to give people a little update on Terry and get a little feedback from Dr. Kate on this. So as you guys know, Terry was sentenced to 6 months in prison at Fort Leavenworth. He is going to be released on May 14th, and we have that on the website. We announced that last week. We're inviting anyone in the Baltimore region or anybody who cares to travel here to greet him when he returns on Saturday morning to Baltimore. And we have quite a few people signed up. We'd love to have another 100 more or so please go there and consider joining us. It's going to be quite exciting, and he'll be going straight from there to his home with his family. So he's done extremely well in prison, if you can say that. He's maintained his sense of humor. He said to me the other day when we said, well, we ordered extra feather pillows for you for the night he's released. He said, pillow? What's a pillow? You know, he said, you know, I don't know what they have to sleep on there. He's maintained good shape. He's maintained good diet. He's been doing huge amounts of reading. Those of you who follow the website know that. He's plowed through tons of C.S. Lewis and Chuck Colson and almost every founding father document he can get his hands on, and just a whole range of materials. And it's really coming out just with a new appreciation of the very Constitution for which he has so firmly stood in his experience. And he is very much looking forward to getting out, obviously. And guess what he wants to eat day one, Kate? Do you have any idea?
No.
He wants to go to a really good barbecue joint. So
great.
We'll see.
Great.
This wonderful couple in Leavenworth who's been visiting with Terry every week for months now has one picked out. They've got it all queued up. Take him there. The minute he gets out, he just the food in prison hasn't been terrible, but he's looking forward to some really decent food, which will be very exciting. So let's go back and talk about Terry's actions, because I said he's gotten a lot of heat, especially from some of the kind of more Obama-focused websites like Caflog and Fogbo and others. But I'll tell you that's outweighed by thousands of people who, while they may not even have agreed with his method, even military people, they certainly have encouraged him in the principle for which he stood. So let's talk about that. You were at the trial. What were some of your impressions about that and how it played out?
I have to say the first word that comes to mind is unfair, completely unfair. I mean, I saw the judge deny every single motion that could be made on Terry's behalf. I saw, for example, the tremendous video that Terry did. Terry could not use that in his own defense, but the prosecution was allowed to go through that video and pick apart that that in their case.
Tell us what happened though when they played it.
The audience clapped, and that's when the judge lost control of the courtroom, because basically they played that, and it was the prosecution played that, and it was meant to degrade Terry Lakin, but all of us in the well, I didn't clap because I knew that was like sort of out of court procedure, but it was a spontaneous clap. Everybody stood up and clapped for the thing, and that surprised everybody. It was really a surprise. I think the judge was shocked. The panel members were shocked. Terry's lawyer was, his eyes were wide open because he didn't want any sanctions to come on everybody. But that was the reaction, so you could see that Terry's supporters were Terry's supporters. And the military tried to use that to degrade him. So, they had to find something stupid. They had to dig for a reason to convict Terry Lakin. And, in my view, it was the most stupid reason. He failed to board Flight X.
Well, that actual charge was what's called missing movement, which is a soldier has to go when he's called, and Terry knew that. So that was a pretty serious charge. But
it
that's
is
another
a pretty
thing.
serious charge. But what I saw in the trial, what I saw in the court-martial, was the only evidence they had of missing movement was he failed to board that flight.
Right. And interesting that, other thing that people have said frequently over the last 14 months since he started the case with Paul Jensen and then with Neil Puckett consistently is, he was a pawn. He was manipulated into doing this. We keep responding, no. He was fully aware of what he did, fully aware of the consequences. In fact, so many people try to talk him out of it, I can't even catalog them all. He is an officer and a leader and made an educated and deliberate decision. So people need to understand that, right? You saw that in the trial.
The people who were the pawns, I'll tell you, the one person in that courtroom that was not a pawn was Terry Lakin. Everyone else in that courtroom was a pawn. The panel, the judge, the prosecution, and I have to say I was not happy with his defense attorney. Now, I'm not an attorney, but I'm telling you, this could have been done in a different way. It didn't have to be that way. But that's what those pawns wanted, was to see that happen to that person on the stand, and that was a bigger message. So, no, he's not a pawn, and anyone who thinks he is, I think, is just definitely not a supporter. He never was. He stood for what he had to, and he knew, I don't know if he knew what his own defense attorney was going to do to him. I don't really care to know, but I hope that never happens to anybody ever again. And for that, I just there are almost no words that I can express in terms of my gratitude, my support, my tears for what happened there, and my joy for him that he is alive and coming out, and the absolute space that he should have to reacquaint with his family and to really think what he needs to do next. His sacrifice has been enormous. I don't think any of us have a right to say, okay, now you got to do this, because we're not the ones who sat behind the bar, sat behind the cells, sat behind the bars, and so. Anyway, so I again expect these people who are saying this about Terry and the Lakin Fund are the same people who've been saying this about all of us who've been concerned about the Constitution for so long. And I have to conclude, they're soulless, worthless people as far as I'm concerned. Not only are they intellectually dishonest, they don't have a soul. They're empty and dead. What Terry Lakin did, what you're doing right now, what all of people who are listening, all of us who have been working on this issue will go down in history as how this country was saved, how this Constitution survived. You know, we live on. Terry lived on to fight another day. And, you know, his inspiration and what he did gives many of us inspiration to move on. So a huge thank you to Terry Lakin. Just to tell you, I was a member of the Continental Congress in November 2009. We got this great pin that shows a patriot with a flag behind him, and I gave that pin to Terry Lakin for his courage as one of our refounders. He said, I'll give it back to you when this thing is over. And my saying, this thing won't be over for about 20 years. So, Terry, keep the pin, and, you know, God bless.
Well, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what comes of this. I agree. I think in the end, at some point, this is all going to come out and come clean. But for now, we get him home. And I really appreciate your understanding. Terry said, well, what are people saying? I said, well, Terry, there's a couple people who called and said they want you to rip your clothes off and run around Washington screaming, you know, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, you know. And he said, well, I'm not doing that. I said, yeah, we told him you weren't doing that. He has some
clothes on. That'll be fine. No.
He has some restrictions because he's still under the UCMJ, as we've indicated on the website, which is the Uniform Military Code of Justice. He can't act any differently than he could as an officer until he's formally discharged, which could be a few months or even more than a year if he continues on his appeals. And those are decisions that will all be made when he gets home and gets to speak to the appellate JAG Corps that will be assigned to him. So, you know, we'll just wait and see. For right now, everyone please keep supporting him, keep encouraging him. We need to continue to support him financially until he gets established. One of his major priorities will be for him and his brother, Greg, who's also a doctor, to go to the Maryland Medical Board of Healing Arts, I think it's called, and make sure that his medical license is still valid in Maryland. And then he loves being a doctor. That's what he really wants to get back to. So hopefully he'll find a good position in Maryland to continue on while this kind of continues to just flow out until we see where it's going to end up. And we'll certainly keep everyone informed.
One question for you is, I know a lot of people want to write to their congressman and get a hearing going. Are we restricted from doing that until, you know, he's out from underneath the U.S.
Not at all. All U.S. citizens can do whatever in the world they want to do. You know,
Thank you.
If you please pound your congressmen and senators, tell them to look into this. Tell them to petition the White House based upon Obama's just really kind of cavalier delivery of this one single document. No, absolutely. And we're coming up on our last few seconds here. So, Dr. Kate, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It's so much fun to finally get to talk to you after these few months. So,
thank you so much.
And hopefully, you know, you all hear a little bit more from Terry over the next couple of weeks once he gets out, and just keep tuned. So, thank you very much. We're going to turn it back to America's Web Radio, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Lieutenant Colonel Terry Lakin, in obedience to his officer's oath to defend the Constitution, is asking a simple question. Mr. Obama, please confirm where you were born. Terry is not asking to see a secret tattoo or unseal a juvenile record of some youthful prank. All Terry is asking is to see Barack Obama's legal and verifiable long-term birth certificate and proof that Obama meets the constitutional requirements for presidential eligibility. However, Obama, instead of simply answering the question, allowed Terry to be sentenced with no defense to 6 months in prison, and he lost his pay, benefits, rank, and pension. Get the facts today about Terry's case at www.terrylakin.com. This is an issue about which every American should be deeply concerned. Get the facts today at www.terrylakin.com.